Good morning. My name is Hugh Williams, and I am the national spokesperson for the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association, known as CADA. With me this morning is Mr. Brian Kingston, who is President and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, and Mr. David Adams, who's President and CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada. We are here, quite frankly, to announce that Canada needs urgent action to achieve its zero-emission goals, and that urgent action has to come in terms of charging infrastructure. Canada needs to dramatically improve our charging infrastructure. Canadians, quite frankly, expect that they can afford, use, and charge their EVs in a manner that suits their individual needs and their geographical requirements. They have to have this certainty before making the second most important purchase of most families' lives. For charging, that means that Canadians must be able to charge these vehicles where they work, live, and play, and not having to rely solely on the public charging infrastructure or having to add 30 to 45 minutes to their daily commute. The challenge of a charging infrastructure and the shift to EVs is not a car dealer problem. It's not a car manufacturer problem or even a car customer problem. It's an all-in societal transition to a new way of powering families and businesses in this country. For that entire societal transition, we need real government leadership that ensures we have the charging infrastructure to meet Canadians' needs. We cannot leave Canadians unplugged. We are also facing an affordability crisis in Canada, and the car business is not immune in any way, shape, or form. The age of the vehicle fleet, the age of the vehicle that an average family has, is growing and has hit record levels. We've also seen that demand has outstripped the supply of vehicles during the pandemic, and that continues today. Supply has not met demand. That means that we're facing a shortage and higher priced vehicles, and with an EV mandate that is redundant, that problem is only going to be exacerbated. I now turn it over to Mr. Kingston.
Thank you. Good morning. The zero-emission vehicle timeline that we've released today outlines the charging infrastructure required to achieve 100% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2035. The timeline shows that Canada is not on track to provide the necessary charging infrastructure to support widespread ZEV adoption. It shows that growth in zero-emission vehicle sales and the on-road fleet to achieve the targets established by government will require a massive rollout of charging infrastructure. There were 124,000 zero-emission vehicles registered in Canada in 2022. That figure needs to grow to 400,000 in 2026, 1.2 million in 2030, and 2 million by 2035. With those growth rates, we will have 12.4 million zero-emission vehicles on Canada's roads in the next 12 years. This simply cannot be achieved without a massive rollout of charging infrastructure, akin to Canada's first major mega project, building the National Railway. According to the government's own projections, we need 195,000 public ports by 2030 and 442,000 public charging ports by 2035. If we use more ambitious charging ratios that have been established by jurisdictions like California, that increases to nearly 400,000 chargers by 2030 and over 1 million by 2035. Last year, we rang the alarm about Canada's poor charging infrastructure rollout and EV readiness performance. Canada ranks 13 of 14 countries on the EY EV Readiness Index, largely due to weak infrastructure. So how have we done since then? There were 16,000 public EV charging ports available to Canadians last May. 1 year later, there are 6,000 more ports. At that pace of build-out, it will take 30 years to achieve the 195,000 target that the government has set, 40 years to get to 400,000 chargers. Canada's zero-emission vehicle charging network will be ready for Canadians in 2100. Without urgent action, Canada's ZEV sales targets are a failure before the ink dries on the regulation. Thank you.
David Adams from the Global Automakers of Canada. What I'd like to add as an EV driver are the real challenges associated with the existing infrastructure. It's not only having enough infrastructure, it's also having infrastructure that's operational. Personal experience from driving my EV long distance up to Sudbury, not more than a week or so ago, all but one piece of charging infrastructure that I went to plug in my vehicle, I had to contact the service provider and spend 20 minutes on the phone before I was even able to charge my vehicle. So we need more infrastructure, and we also need infrastructure that is operational and accessible. Too often, the infrastructure that is in place is not noticeable to consumers as they're driving down the highway. Signage is required, operational and accessibility is required, and that's the only way that we're going to induce consumers to make this shift. If the charging experience is such that it befuddles consumers, there's too many different apps, too many ways to use the charging infrastructure, it's going to be problematic. While I'm an EV enthusiast and I'm prepared to put up with a little bit of inconvenience, most consumers are not. And we need to make this transition as easy and as simple as possible for all consumers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to field them. On est disponible pour les entrevues en français et interviews later as well for those that would require them. Thank you and good morning.